Hi folks, Matt Easton here of Schola Gladiatoria. So, as promised quite some time ago now, I'm giving you a look at some of Fabrice Cognot products. Cognot is spelt Cognot, incidentally, for those of you who want to Google him. I will of course put a link to his web page and Facebook page underneath this video. So previously we have looked at Fabrice's warhammers. This is a type of 17th century horseman's hammer, as they're often known. You'll see it's got the belt clip at the side there, or other suspension method. Wherever you want to hang it off, you could potentially hang it off part of the saddle or off a belt or something like this. And we've spoken a little bit about this type of warhammer previously, and the fact that warhammers did continue in use beyond the medieval period in some parts of the world, in India for example, into the 19th century even. But here we're just looking at the European style of horseman's hammer, this type being from the 17th century. And we have also seen this type, if I just shift that one up to the top there, we've also seen this one below as well. Now obviously this is a sort of review of Fabrice's stuff, of what he makes. And as you can see, it's pretty spectacular. So if I just bring it closer to the camera, hopefully you'll be able to see things a little bit closer than you have done previously. So there is the head of the hammer. You can see marks in the steel, which is the sort of striations of the wrought iron in this case. That is that when you're using traditionally forged methods with potentially inclusions of slag and other impurities in the iron, this is what it looks like. We're very used to these days seeing mono steel, highly polished, looking very flat, but historical iron and steel tends not to look like that until really the 18th, 19th century. So when we're looking at medieval and Renaissance artifacts, you will often see blemishes and variations in the steel when you look at it. It's not something that you only see with things like woots or pattern welding. The head there you can see is smooth. It's got a very nicely formed button on the end, which is securing the whole assembly, and a little, you can just see where that, so this is the belt clip at the side, there, and you can just about see where it's traditionally riveted into the side there, and the rivet goes all the way through the hammerhead to the other side there, which I think you can probably just about see if I catch the light on it. So this is all made in really quite traditional methods. So let's just have a little look at the hilt. So the hilt is twisted wire, a mixture I believe of brass and iron wire, or brass and steel. It's got almost a sword-like faceted pommel with some lovely details on it there, essentially filed into the edges of those sort of facets. It's a bit like a scent stopper pommel, in fact. And then the guard at the side, relatively simple guard on this one, and some file work on the actual shaft of the hammer. Let's put that hammer down for a second. So now looking at this example with the twisted shaft, so to speak, and we've established that this is actually made by filing and twisting the bar. It's not made by forge welding separate bars together or anything like that. But the thing, apart from the twisted shaft, if I just move that up there, you can see it's beautifully made, that really stands out on this example, and why it is a lot more time has gone into this one and why it is a more expensive example, is that etching. And you can see just on the base of the shaft there, you can see some really nice acid etching. Etching is done with acid by blanking out an area. You usually put a paste over the area, and then you essentially scratch out or rub out the bits that you want the acid to act upon. And then you apply the acid, and it burns into the areas that are not protected by the blocker, essentially by the paste. And there's various different things you can use to block the acid, but that's one way of doing it. But yeah, so it's acid etching all around there, and in fact even on the sort of top of the rondel there you can see as well. It's got a handle similar to the other one, a little bit finer wire I'd say maybe on this one, a little bit more tightly wound. Mixture of, I believe, brass and could be silver in this case actually. I'd need to check with Fabrice on that, with what are known as Turk's head knots at top and bottom of the grip, and you can see more etching again on the pommel there, all the way around. And then if we come up the shaft to the belt hook, you'll see the actual belt hook has got etching, acid etching all the way up it, and the entire head in fact has got acid etching. Sorry that I'm struggling to get things into shot here. I'm actually filming kind of the camera with the camera backwards to get the right angle, so my orientation of what's up and down and left and right is a bit skewed here. But hopefully, get the focus to work, there we go. You can see the standard and detail and quality of that etching there. Fabrice is one of the only people I know actually who really uses etching quite a bit, and he seems to have really got the knack of it. He's a good artist and he's using his strengths there. It's absolutely beautiful work. Even the little recesses of the hammer, you'll see, have got etching in. Now let's put that hammer down. Just to reiterate at this point, Fabrice does make some standard-ish products that he holds in stock. He also makes, there are certain things like folding knives that he makes a lot of, and certain types that he likes doing. But fundamentally, he is a custom maker. So if there's something that you want replicated, or you've just got an idea, it could be historical, it could be fantasy, it could just be a combination of ideas in your own head. He's able to try and make that into reality for you, and he can make swords, knives, obviously warhammers, maces, anything you can really think of, he can turn his hand to. So by all means, you know, if there's something that you think that using the skills that you can see implemented on these warhammers, then get in contact with him and find out what's possible. So next thing we're going to look at, it's a little thing, okay, something very, a little bit different. These are the sort of things that Fabrice knocks up, and obviously a lot cheaper than the things that, like the warhammers, and it's just a little, there we go, just a little knife, really nicely made little blade. It's quite sharp, I can feel it sticking into my hand, but it's got a nice satin polish, it's a flat bevel, straight gradient to the edge, wrought iron tang that is essentially becomes the sort of grip. There's various ways you could potentially grip that. You know, you could stick one of your fingers through and do various things. Maybe something like that, for example. That would work. Or indeed, you could just hold it as a small knife like that if you were using it as a, you know, for whittling or sharpening your pencil or whatever you want to do with a small knife. And he does all the leather work himself as well, so that's really nice, is that, you know, most of the things that Fabrice makes will come with a scabbard or sheath, either as standard or one to your own design as you like, and he makes them in traditional way, so there's actually usually two layers of leather, an inner layer and an outer layer, all hand stitched. So next item we're going to look at, one of my favourites, is this. So it is, I believe, more or less a replica of a end of the 15th but more really early 16th century style of dagger that would be worn at your side in all sorts of civilian and potentially military situations, but I would say it's more of a civilian dagger than a military one. You can see it's in high polish on the blade, beautiful blade. The blade is actually somewhat like a Fairbairn Sykes dagger in terms of size. I haven't measured it, but looking at it, it's about 7 or 8 inches long, double-edged, straight bevel. It's sharp, it's pointy, it's a really nice piece of steel. The detail is really in the hilt, and you can see that beautiful, I'm not actually sure what it was, it could be walnut, but it's got a beautiful translucency to it, those grip plates, and they are traditionally riveted with tubular hollow rivets which go right the way through the tang in 2 slabs, one on each side. And you can see the tang running all the way down here and all the way to the pommel, in fact. And the tang has got chisel work on it, and then the pommel plates, which themselves are made of steel as well, are riveted. I can see one of the rivets coming through there. I believe there's probably, is there a lower one? Maybe just an upper one in this case. But there's a rivet on it that goes all the way through, and then you've got this beautiful decoration, which again is made up of tubular rivets which go all the way through the pommel. And I don't know if you'll be able to see from your angle, but you can see all the way through all of those rivets. They go right the way through the tang, and it gives a beautiful aesthetic look. And you've also got the really nice detail of this nagel or side nail, much like you get on a Langmesser, on the side of the quillon block. And it's just all beautifully done. Even the ends of the quillons have got little X's filed in them. This is a lovely, lovely thing. Really one of my favourites that I've ever seen of Fabrice's, actually. And that's, like I say, that's the sort of dagger that you might find in the sort of Tudor period. So I'm imagining you're looking at something like 1520s, 1530s, something like that. Really, really nice piece, something that you might find in Northern Europe in that period, in the time of perhaps Henry VIII or Achille Marozzo, depending how you look at it. So next up is something that Fabrice makes quite a lot of, and that is a little folder. It's essentially a medieval style folding knife, but with his own take on it. It's got a flint-knapped look, and you can see the flint-knapped effect. This is solid steel, the handle, with the recess for the blade actually essentially cut out of the steel, and the flint-knapped effect is given by, I believe, grinding, probably with a wheel grinder in this case, and perhaps finished with filing. And then the whole thing is oil blued. Now Fabrice does these in various different finishes. This is a very nice sort of slightly bluey, slightly goldy finish, which is done by heating the steel up to a certain temperature and then either letting it cool naturally, or you can put it in oil or other liquids to give certain finishes. And it is really, really nice. And I tell you, it's really tactile as well. It feels really nice in the hand and actually gives a pretty good grip. In terms of how these function, so in essence this is a medieval folding knife. Sometimes they have an extension out here, which I personally prefer because it assists in opening them. With the type that don't have that, you have to, much like with a modern Swiss Army knife, you have to sort of grab the edge of the blade, and I find that a little bit fiddly to get the blade out. I find it easier to get out if there's a lever on the back, but that's just personal preference. In terms of something to go in your pocket, this is actually more practical because the little arm sticking out at the back can kind of get caught on things, and it makes the overall length of it folded longer, of course. So fold the blade out, it's nice and stiff, which is really, with a non-locking folding knife, is really what you want, because you don't want it folding when you don't want it folding. And the blade is lovely. It's got a satin finish, a slightly bluey grey hue from the heat treatment, and some of Fabrice's knives even have almost like a hamon or a temper line along the edge sometimes, depending on the individual examples. So each one of these is individually made, and if you look on his website at any one time, he usually has a number of these in stock, all slightly different sizes, slightly different blade shapes, slightly different finishes to the grips. And as I said before, he can do any of these to order. So if you want a bigger one or a smaller one, or one with a different shaped blade or a different colour grip or a different style of grip, then you know he can do it. And so he's completely amenable to all of those different details. But these are lovely, lovely things, and I actually know quite a lot of people now who own Fabrice's folding knives and carry them as everyday utility knives. They're good things and made of good quality steel, usually well heat treated. Good reliable things. So let's fold that away. So the very last thing is yet another medieval dagger. So at first glance it might look like it's got a similar blade to this one that we looked at, but in actual fact it's a little bit longer, and it's got this very characteristic sort of ricasso essentially at the base of the blade. Now this is a style of dagger, and you'll notice it's the so-called Bullock Dagger grip, but this is a style of dagger. Sorry about the focus on the camera, it's not doing what I want it to do. But this is a style of grip which obviously harks back to the 14th century. So this style of hilt, in its basic form, can be found in the 14th century, and obviously we know it as a Bullock knife or a Bullock dagger. But with this particular assortment of features, so this pommel cap, which I'll look at a little bit more closely in a second, but also these sort of this quillon block with these almost raised quillons coming up the side, and then the recessed ricasso, is a very, I would say, early 16th century thing. I believe you do find examples that date from as early as about 1490 of this form. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. But as far as I'm concerned, this particular style of Bullock dagger tends to date between about 1495 and about 1520, 1530-ish at the latest. So they are really something of the early 16th century in general. And again, perhaps similar, perhaps a little bit later than this. You could argue that this is more late 15th century and this is more early 16th century. I think some people might say that. But generally speaking, I think it would be fair to say you could find both of these daggers around at the same time. Around the year 1500, 1510, you could find both of these daggers around. So the beginning of the Tudor period in England, for example. And again, lovely. It's a bit of a longer blade. I think that blade's probably about 9 inches, and it's a thick cross section. It's a thick stabbing blade. It's the sort of blade that you might even get on something like a rundle dagger. And in fact, that type of blade stems from the requirement to be able to stab through resistive things like gambesons and such like. So it is quite a beefy thrusting blade. And the hilt is just beautiful. I'm actually not sure, I think this might be boxwood stained, but Fabrice would be able to verify that. Hopefully he will comment underneath. But it's got an absolutely lovely grain to it. And the main detail of this that I want to just show you, I'm not sure how well this is going to pick up on the camera, especially because the focus isn't really doing what I want it to do at the moment. There we go, you can just about see, I think. The pommel is actually got engraving. So the important difference between engraving and etching is that etching is done with acid, usually, and so it's a chemical process, and engraving is done with a scratching, essentially, with a chisel or a pointy object into a flat surface, usually. And that is, I believe, the Virgin, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that, I believe that's the Virgin Mary holding the baby Jesus. And I think this is a replica of an original. Again, hopefully Fabrice will comment underneath this video. But I think that is a replica of an example from a collection. So there we go, that's just a brief. I do have more of Fabrice's things here, but I can't do a video that's too long. And I don't want to bore you guys, but hopefully that's been really interesting for you, and you can see things a little bit more closely. So Fabrice can really do a wide variety of different things. He started off focusing on daggers and knives, but increasingly now he's getting commissions to do larger things, I believe, like Langmesser and like these warhammers and maces and things like this. So take a look at Fabrice's stuff, even if you can't afford it, because it is, you know, it is custom work and it is expensive. It is out of a lot of people's budget, but it's still great to look at. And even if you're a maker, it might give you some ideas as well for things that maybe you could try and start working on. Fabrice has been working on these things for, I think, over a decade now. But his work has really come on a hell of a lot in that time, and I think he's learning new techniques and learning how to make new objects as well all the time. And he is a PhD doctorate as well in medieval weaponry, so he's researched this stuff, and he's completely committed to trying to reproduce original techniques and original, but whether it be constructional techniques or decorative techniques. And so he's quite a unique craftsman. So go and check out his stuff, like his page, the links are below this video. Cheers folks. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, follow us on Facebook. You can buy t-shirts through Spreadshirt, support us on Patreon, or follow us on Pinterest. Thank you.